To the ER staff, Finley Jenkins was just a liability in oversized scrubs trembling in the corner. However, the dying Navy SEAL on the stretcher saw something else entirely, a legend. When a chief resident's arrogance threatened to kill the commander, the chaotic trauma bay fell dead silent. The soldier didn't ask for a doctor. He gasped out a specific military call sign that carried much more authority than any medical degree in the building. True power isn't always visible until it is pushed too far. This is the incredible story of how a hidden war hero finally took command. The sliding glass doors of St. Jude's Level 1 Trauma Center in Chicago didn't just open. They inhaled the chaos of the city and exhaled exhaustion. For Finley Jenkins, just 3 weeks into her tenure as an ER nurse, the air felt thin. It smelled of rubbing alcohol, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of dried blood, a scent that used to trigger her fight-or-flight response, but now just gave her a dull headache. Finley adjusted her stethoscope, her fingers trembling slightly. To the casual observer, she looked like exactly what her badge said. She was a 26-year-old rookie, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in the deep end. Her scrubs were a size too big, swallowing her athletic frame, and she wore her hair in a messy bun that seemed to symbolize her internal state. She kept her head down, eyes fixed on the floor tiles, counting the scuff marks to steady her breathing. Jenkins, move it or lose it. The bark came from Dr. Lucas Sterling, the chief resident, and the self-proclaimed god of the ER. Sterling was a man who had never been told no in his life. He was brilliant, handsome, in a catalogue model sort of way, and possessed an ego that barely fit through the double doors. Finley flinched, dropping the stack of patient charts she was holding. Papers scattered across the linoleum like frightened birds. "Great," Sterling sneered, stepping over the mess without breaking stride. "Another disaster. Can someone get this girl a coloring book so she stays out of the way of the real doctors? I have a waiting room full of patients and a nurse who can't even hold paper." Laughter rippled through the nursing station. It wasn't malicious from everyone. Some of it was just relief that Sterling's wrath wasn't directed at them, but it stung all the same. Finley fell to her knees, gathering the charts. Her hands weren't shaking because she was weak. They were shaking because she was holding back. Breath in, hold, breath out. Check your 6. She repeated the mantra silently. If Sterling only knew. If any of them knew. Finley wasn't just a nursing school grad. The gap in her employment history, the 4 years she vaguely listed as travel and volunteer work, was actually spent in the dusty, blood-soaked provinces of Kandahar and Helmand. She wasn't just Finley Jenkins. She was Sergeant Jenkins, a combat medic, who had intubated soldiers in the back of careening Humvees while taking enemy fire. She had held intestines in place with her bare hands while mortar shells shook the earth. But here she was, just the rookie, and she wanted to keep it that way. She had left the army to escape the noise, the pressure, the life-and-death decisions made in split seconds. She wanted a boring civilian life where the biggest crisis was a shortage of saline bags. "Leave it, Jenkins," the charge nurse. Martha said kindly but dismissively, leaning over the counter. "Go check vitals in bed 4. Dr. Sterling is on edge today. Just try to disappear, okay?" "Yes, ma'am," Finley whispered. She stood up, clutching the charts to her chest. Disappear. That was the goal. But fate, it seemed, had a different shift schedule. The red phone on the wall, the bat phone, as the staff called it, rang with a jarring, shrill tone that cut through the ambient noise of the ER. The chatter stopped instantly. That phone only rang for mass casualties or high-priority incomings. Martha snatched the receiver. Her face went pale. ETA 2 minutes. Chopper on the roof. We have a VIP transfer from Great Lakes Naval Base. Massive trauma, blast injury, and multiple shrapnel wounds. Sterling spun around, his eyes lighting up. This was his stage. Trauma 1. Let's go, people. I want full respiratory support. O-neg blood on standby, and get X-ray down here, now. He pointed a finger at Finlay. You, Jenkins, you're floating. Do not touch the patient. Do not speak. Just run labs and fetch what I tell you. If you mess up a VIP case, I will personally ensure your license is revoked before the heart monitor flatlines. Do you understand, Toll? Understood, Doctor. Finlay said, her voice flat. The team rushed toward the elevator banks that led to the helipad. The distinct thumping rhythm of rotor blades began to vibrate the ceiling tiles. Thump, thump, thump. Finlay's heart rate spiked, not from fear, but from familiarity. That wasn't a standard medevac chopper. The heavy, low frequency. That was a Black Hawk, or maybe a Pave Hawk. Military. The elevator doors pinged open. A team of paramedics flanked by 2 men in plain civilian clothes, who moved with the distinct scanning alertness of special operators, burst into the hallway, pushing a gurney. Male mid-30s, the lead paramedic shouted, sweat dripping down his face. Sustained injuries from a training exercise accident involving explosives. BP is 80/50 and dropping tachycardic at 130. He's drifting in and out. On the gurney lay a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite, though half of him was covered in blood-soaked field dressings. His t-shirt had been cut open, revealing a torso that was a map of scars and fresh wounds. His face was caked in soot, but his jaw was set in a grimace of pain. Sterling took charge immediately as they transferred him to the trauma bed. On my count, 1, 2, 3, lift. The patient groaned a guttural sound. I need access, Sterling shouted. Get another line in. He's hypovolemic. Jenkins, get out of the way. Finlay was standing in the corner, pressing herself against the supply cabinet, but her eyes were scanning the patient with a precision Sterling couldn't dream of. She saw the way the patient's chest was rising unevenly. She saw the slight distension in his neck veins that the other nurses were missing because they were focused on the blood on his abdomen. Doctor, Finlay said, her voice quiet. Check his airway. His trachea is shifting. Quiet, Sterling snapped, listening to the patient's chest with his stethoscope. I have breath sounds on the right. It's just shallow. He's guarding because of the abdominal pain. Focus on the bleed. We need to stabilize his pressure before we scan. He has a tension pneumothorax, Finlay said louder this time. The old instinct was clawing its way up her throat. If you push fluids without venting the chest, you'll kill him. Sterling whipped around, his face red. I have been an attending for 10 years, Jenkins. You have been a nurse for 10 minutes. I hear breath sounds. Now shut your mouth or get out of my trauma bay. The 2 men in plain clothes, the patient's escorts, looked up. They were terrifying men, bearded and bulky with eyes like sharks. They looked from the screaming doctor to the trembling nurse. On the bed, the patient's eyes fluttered open. They were a piercing, icy blue, cutting through the haze of shock and pain. He stared at the ceiling, gasping for air, feeling the pressure building in his chest, crushing his heart. He knew exactly what was happening. He'd seen it happen to his brothers. He was drowning in his own body. He turned his head, fighting the darkness, and his eyes landed on Finlay. Time seemed to freeze. He didn't see the oversized scrubs. He didn't see the messy bun. He saw the way she stood, feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, ready to spring. He saw her eyes not panicked like the others, but calculating, assessing. He knew those eyes. He tried to speak, but only a wheeze came out. "BP is crashing 60/40, Martha yelled. "We're losing him. He's coding," Sterling yelled. "Prepare to intubate. Push 1 milligram epi." "No." Finlay stepped forward, breaking the invisible barrier. "If you intubate him with a tension pneumo, the positive pressure will stop his heart instantly. Look at his neck. Look at the deviation." "Security," Sterling roared. "Get this woman out of here." 2 hospital security guards stepped into the room. Finlay didn't move. She was looking at the patient. The patient was looking at her, the man on the table. Commander Jack Ripper O'Connell, Navy SEAL. A man who had survived things that would break ordinary men, summoned the last ounce of his strength. He recognized the energy radiating off her. It was the same energy he felt in the back of that chopper in Fallujah years ago. He reached out a bloodied hand, bypassing the doctor, reaching toward the rookie nurse. "Doc," he rasped. The room went silent. Doc was a term of endearment in the military specifically for combat medics or corpsmen. It wasn't used for civilians. Sterling froze the laryngoscope in his hand. What did he say? Jack O'Connell's eyes locked onto Finlay's. He wheezed, his voice gaining a terrifying, desperate clarity. "Echo 1 9er." Jack choked out his gaze, burning into Finlay. "Dust off." Finlay's body went rigid. It wasn't just a random string of words. It was a call sign, but not just any call sign. Echo 1 9er. That was her unit. That was her call sign in the sandbox. The security guard reached for Finlay's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Finlay looked at the guard, then at Sterling, and finally at the dying man. The trembling nurse vanished. The girl who was afraid of scuffing the floor was gone. In her place stood Sergeant Jenkins. She shook off the guard's hand with a sharp, violent jerk that made the man stumble back. "Don't touch me," she commanded. Her voice had dropped an octave. It was cold, hard steel. She stepped up to the trauma bed, shoving Dr. Sterling aside with her shoulder. "Hey," Sterling shouted. "Are you insane? Give me a 14-gauge needle. Now." Finlay barked at Martha. Martha, stunned by the sudden transformation, instinctively grabbed the catheter and slapped it into Finlay's hand. "You pierced that chest and you're going to jail," Sterling screamed, lunging for her. One of the SEAL escorts stepped in Sterling's path, blocking him with a forearm like a chaotic iron bar. "Let her work," the SEAL growled. Finlay didn't hesitate. She palpated the second intercostal space on Jack's chest, mid-clavicular line. She didn't look for approval. She didn't ask. She drove the needle deep into the chest cavity. Hiss. The sound of pressurized air escaping was audible throughout the silent room. It sounded like a tire deflating. Jack's chest instantly fell. He took a massive, gasping breath, his lungs expanding fully for the first time in 20 minutes. His vitals monitor, which had been sounding the alarm of his death, suddenly changed its rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. The heart rate slowed. The oxygen saturation climbed. Finlay pulled the needle out, taping the catheter in place. She looked down at Jack. He was breathing. He was alive. She turned slowly to face Dr. Sterling. The room was dead silent. Every nurse, every tech, and the 2 Navy SEALs were staring at her. "Patient is stabilized," Finlay said, her voice devoid of the rookie fear. "Tension pneumothorax relieved. Now you can get your X-ray doctor." Sterling stood there, mouth agape, his face a mixture of fury and humiliation. Jack O'Connell let out a ragged laugh, wincing in pain. He looked at the rookie nurse with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Nice stick, Doc," he whispered. "Took you long enough." Finlay looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't see a patient. She saw the mission, and she realized with a sinking feeling in her gut that her cover was blown. The silence in Trauma 1 was heavier than the lead aprons hanging on the wall. The hissing sound of the decompressed chest had faded, replaced by the steady, rhythmic beeping of the cardiac monitor, a sound that confirmed Finlay Jenkins had just saved a man. Dr. Lucas Sterling was about to kill. Sterling was the first to break the paralysis. His face, initially pale with shock, flushed a deep, angry crimson. His authority, the only currency he valued, had been counterfeited right in front of his team. "You," Sterling sputtered, stepping around the SEAL who had blocked him. He pointed a shaking finger at Finlay. "You are finished. Do you hear me? Practicing medicine without a license, assaulting a superior, endangering a patient." He turned to the security guards who were still standing by the door, looking confused. "Why are you standing there? Arrest her. Get her out of my hospital." "Negative," a deep voice rumbled from the corner. It wasn't the security guard. It was the SEAL escort, the one who had blocked Sterling. He was a massive man with a beard that hid most of his expression, but his eyes were clear. He stepped forward, flashing a badge that hung around his neck, Department of Defense. "Nobody touches her," the man said. He looked at Finlay, tilting his head slightly. "Not until Commander O'Connell says so." On the bed, Jack O'Connell was regaining his color. The immediate threat of death had passed, and the adrenaline of survival was kicking in. He looked at Finlay, who had stepped back from the bedside, her hands raised in a non-threatening posture, her face returning to a mask of neutrality. But the damage was done. The lioness had peeked out from behind the sheep's wool. "Who are you?" Sterling demanded, turning his wrath on the SEALs. "This is a civilian hospital, and that," the SEAL pointed to Jack, "is a high-value asset of the United States Navy. And she," he pointed a thick finger at Finlay, "just kept him from becoming a flag-draped coffin. So, Doctor, unless you want to explain to the Admiral why you ignored a tension pneumothorax, I suggest you step back and assess the shrapnel wounds." Sterling opened his mouth, closed it, and then swallowed his pride like a jagged pill. He turned back to the patient, barking orders at the other nurses to cover his humiliation. "Get him to CT. Move prep the OR." As the team scrambled to move the gurney, Jack grabbed the railing. His eyes found Finlay's one last time as they wheeled him out. He didn't speak, but he tapped 2 fingers against his temple, a salute, a recognition. Finlay stood alone in the empty trauma bay. Her hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was the crash, the adrenaline dump. Martha, the charge nurse, walked back in slowly. She looked at Finlay as if she were seeing a stranger. "Finlay?" Martha asked softly. What was that?" "The needle. The call sign." "Who are you?" Finlay closed her eyes. The facade she had carefully built over the last 6 months, the shy, incompetent rookie, the girl who traveled Europe and volunteered at animal shelters, was crumbling. I read a lot." Finlay lied, her voice weak. "I saw it on a medical show once." Martha wasn't buying it. She crossed her arms. You don't learn how to needle a chest with that kind of confidence from Grey's Anatomy, honey. And that man, he called you Doc. He knew a call sign. It was a coincidence, Finlay said, grabbing a disinfectant wipe and furiously scrubbing a spot of blood on the counter. I have to get back to work. I have patients in the waiting room. Finlay, stop. Martha put a hand on her shoulder. Sterling is going to the board. He's writing you up for immediate termination. He's calling the nursing board to flag your license. If you don't tell me the truth, I can't help you. Finlay stopped scrubbing. She looked at Martha, her eyes weary and old, far older than 26. Let him fire me, Finlay whispered. It's better that way. She walked out of the trauma bay, leaving Martha stunned. Finlay went straight to the locker room, her heart pounding. She needed to leave. She needed to pack her bag and disappear before they started digging, before they found out that Finlay Jenkins didn't just volunteer abroad, before they found out why she had left the military. She opened her locker and grabbed her backpack. As she turned, she froze. Standing in the doorway of the locker room was the bearded SEAL escort. He was leaning against the frame arms, crossed, filling the space. Going somewhere, Echo 19er, he asked. Finlay dropped her bag. I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Finlay. Sure it is, the man said, pushing off the doorframe and walking in. And I'm the Tooth Fairy. I saw your file, Jenkins. Or should I say Sergeant Jenkins. 75th Ranger Regiment Support. Or was it attached to DevGru for that op in 2022? Finlay's blood ran cold. I'm not that person anymore. The commander seems to think otherwise, the SEAL said. He's awake. He's refusing anesthesia for the shrapnel removal until he talks to you. I'm not a doctor, Finlay said, backing up. I'm a nurse, a fired nurse, probably. He doesn't care about your title, the SEAL said, stepping closer. His voice dropped low. He says he knows you. He says you were the one on the radio in the Korengal Valley, the one who talked his team through the ambush when their comms officer went down. Finlay flinched. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The static, the screaming, the smell of burning rubber and copper. Korengal. I was just a voice on a radio, she whispered. I wasn't there. You were the voice that got them home, the SEAL said. He wants to say thank you. And he thinks you're in trouble. I'm not in trouble, Finlay snapped. Really? The SEAL raised an eyebrow. Because Sterling is out there right now telling the hospital administrator that you're a rogue nurse with a hero complex who assaulted him. They're talking about Police Finlay, assault charges. Finlay slumped against the lockers. She had saved a life, and it was going to cost her everything. Again. Come with me, the SEAL said. Jack can smooth this over. He has... pull. Finlay looked at her backpack, then at the door. She had spent 3 years running from her past, running from the ghosts of the men she couldn't save. And now the one man she did save was dragging her back in. Fine, she said, steeling herself, but only to tell him to let it go. The VIP recovery room on the 5th floor was guarded by 2 more military personnel. Inside it looked more like a command center than a hospital room. Dr. Sterling was there along with the hospital administrator, Mrs. Halloway, a severe woman with glasses on a chain who looked at nurses like they were budget line items to be cut. Jack O'Connell was sitting up in bed, despite the fresh stitches across his chest and abdomen. He looked pale, but alert, his blue eyes scanning a tablet. When Finlay walked in, flanked by the SEAL, the room temperature seemed to drop. There she is. Sterling pointed. Mrs. Halloway, this is the woman. I want her removed from the premises immediately. I've already called the police to file a report for assault. Mrs. Halloway adjusted her glasses. Ms. Jenkins, Dr. Sterling tells me you performed an invasive surgical procedure without authorization and physically assaulted a physician. Is this true? Finlay opened her mouth to speak, but Jack cut in. She saved my life, Jack said, his voice raspy but commanding. He didn't look at Finlay. He looked straight at Mrs. Halloway. Your doctor here missed a tension pneumothorax. If Ms. Jenkins hadn't acted, I'd be dead, and the Navy would be launching an investigation into this hospital for gross negligence. Sterling bristled. That is speculation. I had the situation under control. She is a loose cannon. A rookie. She barely knows how to check blood pressure. Jack slowly turned his head to look at Sterling. Rookie. He chuckled a dry sound. He tapped the tablet in his lap. I just had my guys pull her service record. Finlay Jenkins, Distinguished Service Cross nominee. 2 Purple Hearts, Combat Medical Badge. She served 4 tours. She has more trauma experience in her little finger than you have in your entire Ivy League career, Doctor. The room went silent. Mrs. Halloway's eyes widened. Sterling looked like he had been slapped. Finlay felt sick. She stared at the floor. You had no right to pull my file, she whispered. That record is sealed. Not to me, Jack said softly. He looked at Finlay. Why are you hiding here, Finlay? Why pretend to be an incompetent rookie? You're one of the best medics the Army ever produced. I'm not a medic anymore, Finlay said, her voice shaking. I'm a nurse. I just want to do my job and go home. You're not doing a job, Jack said. You're hiding. You're punishing yourself. For what? Mrs. Halloway asked, confused. For Operation Red Sand. Sterling sneered, looking at his phone. He had evidently been Googling while Jack spoke. I see it here. A botched extraction. 3 soldiers died. The medic on scene was blamed for triage errors. Finlay felt the room spin. The air left her lungs. That's a lie, Jack said, his voice dangerous. Is it? Sterling smirked, sensing a weakness. The report says the medic chose to treat a local national child instead of a wounded sergeant who bled out. The medic was discharged, dishonorably. General discharge, Finlay whispered, tears stinging her eyes, under honorable conditions. But, yes, I treated the child. See, Sterling spread his hands. She has a history of poor judgment. She prioritizes emotion over protocol. She is dangerous, Mrs. Halloway. She let a soldier die to save a kid. And today, she almost killed me to play hero again. She didn't let him die, Jack shouted, wincing as he sat up straighter. That sergeant was already gone. His femoral artery was severed. She made a command decision to save the life she could. Save. That child is alive today because of her. Jack looked at Finlay, his eyes pleading. Tell them, Finlay. Tell them the truth. Finlay looked at the faces in the room. Sterling's smug triumph, Halloway's judgment, Jack's desperate belief in her. She couldn't do it. The guilt was too heavy. For 3 years she had carried the face of that dying sergeant in her nightmares. She believed Sterling was right. She believed she had failed. I can't, Finlay choked out. I resign. You don't have to fire me. She turned and ran out of the room. Finlay! Wait, Jack yelled, trying to get out of bed, but the monitors blared as his heart rate spiked. The SEALs held him back. Let her go. Sterling said, satisfied. Trash takes itself out. Jack looked at Sterling with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You have no idea what you just did. You just walked the best asset you have out the door. And trust me, Doctor, this isn't over. Finlay ran down the hallway, ignoring the calls of her colleagues. She burst through the emergency exit doors, out into the cool Chicago night. She gasped for air, tears streaming down her face. She had lost. The past had found her, chewed her up, and spit her out. She reached her beat-up sedan in the parking lot, fumbling for her keys. She had to leave Chicago. Maybe go west. Somewhere small. Somewhere where nobody knew what a Black Hawk sounded like. She opened the car door, threw her bag in, and was about to get in when a black SUV screeched to a halt behind her, blocking her in. Finlay froze. Not the police. Please, not the police. The window rolled down. It wasn't the police. It was a man in a suit wearing sunglasses at night. He looked like a Fed, or something worse. Finlay Jenkins, the man asked. Who asks? Finlay said, her hand drifting toward the tire iron under her seat. We have a situation, the man said. Commander O'Connell isn't just a SEAL. He's the key to a sensitive operation. And by saving his life, you've just put a target on your own back. What? Finlay stared at him. The people who tried to kill him with that training accident. The man lowered his sunglasses. They know he survived, and they know a nurse saved him. They think you know what he knows. Finlay laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. I don't know anything. I just stuck a needle in his chest. They don't care, the man said. You're in the game now, Finlay. You can get in the car with me and we can keep you safe, or you can drive away and be dead by morning. Finlay looked at her car, then at the hospital where she had just lost her career, and then at the dark SUV. The drama wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Finlay Jenkins didn't get into the black SUV. She didn't trust men in suits who wore sunglasses at night. Instead, she did the one thing the man didn't expect. She bolted. She scrambled over the hood of her sedan, sprinted across the parking lot, and vaulted a chain-link fence with a fluidity that betrayed her civilian persona. By the time the suit had opened his door, she was gone, disappearing into the labyrinth of alleyways behind the hospital. 3 hours later, she was sitting in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, nursing a lukewarm coffee. She had ditched her phone in a trash can 3 blocks from the hospital. Old habits die hard. She was safe for the moment. But she was also homeless, jobless, and apparently a target. The diner door chimed. Finlay didn't look up, keeping her hand near the steak knife she had swiped from the table. You're hard to track, Echo 19er. Finlay's head snapped up. It wasn't the suit. It was the bearded SEAL from the hospital, the one who had blocked Sterling. He was wearing a hoodie now, blending in. How did you find me? Finlay hissed. You have a pattern, he said, sliding into the booth opposite her. You move in zigzags. You avoid main roads. And you always go for the place with the best line of sight to the door. This was the only spot in a 5-mile radius that fit. He placed a burner phone on the table. Jack wants to talk to you. Finlay stared at the phone. I don't want to talk to him. He ruined my life. He saved your life, the SEAL corrected. The guy in the SUV that wasn't a Fed. That was a cleaner for a private military contractor called Blackwell. They're the ones who rigged the explosives at the training site. They wanted Jack dead because he found out they were selling defective body armor to the Marines. Finlay felt a chill. Defective body armor. Jack has the proof on an encrypted drive. He was supposed to testify before Congress next week. That accident was an assassination attempt. And now that you saved him, Blackwell thinks you're his handler or his contact. They think you have the drive. The phone buzzed. Finlay hesitated, then picked it up. Hello. Finlay. Jack's voice was weak but steady. I'm sorry. I didn't know they would come for you this fast. You dragged me into this, Finlay said, her voice tight. I was invisible. I was safe. You were miserable, Jack countered. I saw your eyes in that ER. You were drowning in boredom and guilt. But we can psychoanalyze later. Right now, I need you. I'm checking myself out of this hospital. You can't, Finlay said, the nurse in her taking over. You have a chest tube. You have fresh sutures. If you move, you'll bleed out. That's why I need you, Jack said. My team can get me to a safe house, but they can't manage my medical. I need a medic. I need my medic. I'm not your medic. You are now. Blackwell has a hit team sweeping the city. They know your face. They know your car. You have two choices. Go it alone and look over your shoulder forever, or come with us. Help me heal, and we take these guys down together. Finlay looked out the window. It was raining. The reflection showed a tired woman in oversized scrubs. She hated that woman. She missed the sergeant. Where's the pickup? She asked. The safe house was a hunting cabin in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, miles from civilization. It smelled of pine and dust. For 3 days, Finlay fell into a rhythm she hadn't realized she craved. She was no longer changing bedpans for ungrateful patients. She was managing a critical trauma case in the field. She checked Jack's vitals every 2 hours. She cleaned his wounds with boiled water and the limited supplies the SEALs had packed. She managed his pain not with drugs, he refused them, so he could stay sharp, but with distraction. They talked. Why did you leave? Jack asked on the 4th night. He was sitting by the fire, his face pale, but the color returning. Finlay was changing the dressing on his chest. Sterling told you. I made a bad call. Sterling is an idiot, Jack said. I read the real report, Finlay, the classified one. You didn't just treat a kid. The sergeant was dead on arrival. His head was gone. You treated the kid because he was the only life left to save. But the army needed a scapegoat for the bad intel that got the squad hit, so they pinned it on the medic. Finlay's hands froze. She looked at him, tears welling up. He was dead. Instantly, Jack said softly. You didn't fail him, Finlay. You were the only one who did anything right that day. You saved an innocent child in the middle of hell. That's not failure. That's grace. For the first time in 3 years, the knot in Finlay's chest loosened. She dropped the bandage and sat back, covering her face with her hands. She sobbed, ugly, racking sobs that shook her frame. Jack reached out, wincing, and placed a hand on her knee. He didn't say anything. He just let her release the ghost she had been carrying. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but clear. The weight was gone. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Jack grimaced, trying to shift his position. We still have a problem. Blackwell knows I'm alive, and they know I have the drive. But I don't. Finlay frowned. What? I hid the drive, Jack said, before the blast. I stashed it in a locker at Union Station in Chicago. I thought I could go back for it. But now we have to go back into the hornet's nest, Finlay finished. Exactly, Jack said, and I can barely walk. I can't retrieve it. It has to be you. Finlay looked at him. Me, I'm a nurse, not a spy. Jack smiled. You're Echo 19er. You're the woman who stared down a chief resident and a room full of SEALs to save a life. You can do this. I'll be in your ear the whole time. Chicago Union Station was a cavernous echo chamber of commuters. Finlay wore a baseball cap and a heavy coat blending into the crowd. In her ear, a tiny earpiece connected her to Jack, who was monitoring security feeds from the safe house thanks to his tech-savvy team. Okay, Finlay. Jack's voice was calm in her ear. Locker 405 is in the North Concourse. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact. Finlay moved through the sea of people. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her hands were steady. She felt alive. I see it, she whispered. Locker 405. Good. The code is my birthday. 0412. Finlay reached the locker. She punched in the code. The lock clicked. She opened the small metal door and reached inside. Her fingers brushed against a cold metallic object. A USB drive. She grabbed it and shoved it into her pocket. Got it. Finlay, freeze. Jack's voice suddenly turned sharp. Don't turn around. 2 men, 6 o'clock. Leather jackets. They're scanning the crowd. It's Blackwell. Finlay's breath hitched. Do they see me? Not yet. But you're in the open. You need to move. Go to the bathroom on your right. Now. Finlay walked briskly toward the restroom. She could feel eyes on her back. She pushed through the door, her mind racing. It was empty. They're waiting outside, Jack said. They're covering the exit. Finlay, is there a window? Finlay checked. Small vent, high up. I can't fit. Okay, Jack said. New plan. You're going to have to walk out there. And get shot. No, you're going to create a diversion. Remember the medical kit you carry. Finlay patted her bag. She always carried a basic trauma kit now. Yes. Is there an EpiPen? Yes. Good. Get ready. Finlay waited. She heard the bathroom door creak open. Heavy footsteps. Miss Jenkins, a voice called out. We know you're in here. Come out and give us the drive and you can go back to checking vitals. Finlay stepped out of the stall. The man was huge, holding a silenced pistol. He smirked. Smart girl. He reached for her bag. Finlay didn't flinch. In one fluid motion, she uncapped the EpiPen in her pocket, lunged forward, and jammed it into the man's neck. The man gasped, his eyes bulging as the massive dose of adrenaline hit his system. His heart rate skyrocketed instantly. He stumbled back, clutching his throat, dropping the gun. Finlay kicked the gun under the stall, grabbed her bag, and sprinted past him. Target down, she yelled into the mic. I'm running. Go south, exit, Jack yelled. The team is 2 minutes out. Finlay burst out of the bathroom and into the main hall. The second man saw her and started running, reaching into his jacket. He's got a gun, Finlay screamed, weaving through the terrified commuters. Get down! Suddenly, the glass ceiling of the station seemed to explode. But it wasn't a bomb. It was flashbangs. Bang! White light blinded the station. Commuters screamed and dropped to the floor. Through the smoke, 3 figures descended from the mezzanine level on ropes. SEALs. They hit the ground running. The Blackwell agent raised his gun, but he was too slow. 2 controlled shots rang out. The agent dropped. The lead SEAL grabbed Finlay. Package secured. Yes. Finlay gasped, patting her pocket. Let's move. They hustled her out the side exit into a waiting van. As the door slammed shut and the tires squealed, Finlay leaned back against the seat, her adrenaline crashing. She looked at the SEALs. They were grinning. "Nice move with the EpiPen, Doc," one of them said. "Jack told us you were dangerous." Finlay laughed, a breathless, exhilarated sound. She pulled the drive out of her pocket. "Let's get this to DC," she said. "I have a story to finish." The weeks following the incident at Union Station were a blur of debriefings, safe houses, and high-level meetings. With the encrypted drive delivered to the Senate Oversight Committee, the Blackwell scandal exploded across the national news. The CEO was indicted, arrests were made, and the defective armor was recalled. But for Finlay Jenkins, the war wasn't over. While the nation focused on the military scandal, Dr. Lucas Sterling focused on his own petty vengeance. Humiliated by the events in his ER, Sterling had launched a full-scale offensive. He went on talk shows painting himself as the victim of a deranged rogue nurse who had hijacked his trauma bay. He filed a lawsuit against the hospital, and Finlay personally claiming emotional distress and professional negligence. The medical board, under pressure, suspended Finlay's nursing license pending a hearing. Finlay sat in a small hotel room in DC, watching Sterling on TV. "It's a matter of safety," Sterling said to the news anchor, his face a mask of concern. "We cannot have untrained individuals playing doctor. She endangered a patient. She is unstable. I am simply trying to protect the integrity of the medical profession." Jack turned the TV off. He was walking with a cane, now his wounds healing, but his anger was fresh. "He's lying," Jack growled. "We have to stop him." "How?" Finlay asked, defeated. "He has the credentials. He has the hospital lawyers. I'm just a former medic with a checkered service record." "You're not just a medic," Jack said, sitting beside her. "You're the woman who took down a Blackwell agent with an EpiPen. You're the woman who saved me. It's time we stop hiding in the shadows, Finlay. It's time to go on the offensive." "What do you mean?" "The hearing is tomorrow," Jack said. "It's public. The press will be there. Sterling expects you to be a no-show or to come in looking guilty. I say we walk in there with the truth." "The truth about what happened in Kandahar?" Finlay asked quietly. "The truth about everything," Jack said. He took her hand. "I'll be right there with you." The hearing room was packed. Cameras flashed as Finlay walked in. She wasn't wearing scrubs this time. She wore a sharp navy blazer, her hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look at the floor. She looked straight ahead. Sterling was already seated, looking smug. He whispered something to his lawyer and chuckled. The head of the medical board, Dr. Aristhorne, banged the gavel. "We are here to review the license of Nurse Finlay Jenkins. Dr. Sterling, you may proceed." Sterling stood up, buttoning his suit. He launched into a theatrical speech about protocol hierarchy and the sanctity of the physician's role. He described Finlay as hysterical and insubordinate. "She acted without orders," Sterling concluded. "She performed a needle decompression, a highly advanced procedure on a hunch. It was reckless. It was criminal." Dr. Aristhorne looked at Finlay. "Ms. Jenkins." "Do you have a defense?" Finlay stood up. Her hands were steady on the table. "It wasn't a hunch," she said clearly. "It was a diagnosis." "You are not a doctor," Sterling shouted. "No," Finlay said. "I am a combat medic. I have treated more tension pneumothoraxes in a single afternoon than you have seen in your entire career." "Relevance," Sterling's lawyer objected. "The relevance," a voice boomed from the back of the room, "is that she was right." The doors swung open. Jack O'Connell walked in. He wasn't wearing civilian clothes. He was in his full dress whites, medals gleaming on his chest, silver star, bronze star, purple heart. The room gasped. He walked to the front, leaning on his cane, and stood next to Finlay. Commander O'Connell, Dr. Aristhorne said, surprised. This is a closed hearing regarding medical licensing. And I am the patient in question, Jack said. I believe my testimony is relevant. He turned to the cameras. Dr. Sterling claims Ms. Jenkins endangered my life. The truth is, Dr. Sterling was watching me die. He was so focused on his ego that he missed the signs of a collapsing lung. Finley Jenkins didn't just act. She recognized the shift in my trachea. She saw the distended veins. She knew I had seconds left. Jack looked at Sterling. You call her a rookie. This woman is a veteran of 4 combat tours. She has saved more American lives than everyone in this room combined. And when she saved mine, she didn't do it for credit. She didn't do it for a license. She did it because that's what heroes do. Sterling was sweating now. This is emotional manipulation. Her record, she was discharged for negligence. False, Jack said, producing a document. I have here a declassified after-action report from the Department of the Army. It confirms that Sergeant Jenkins's actions in Kandahar were not negligent. They were heroic. She has been fully exonerated, and her Distinguished Service Cross is being reinstated as of this morning. The room erupted. Reporters were shouting questions. Sterling slumped in his chair, his narrative destroyed. Jack turned to Finley. And one more thing. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The room went dead silent. Finley, Jack said, his voice softening. You saved my life in that ER. You saved my honor by retrieving that drive. You are the bravest person I know. I don't want to go on another mission without you. He didn't kneel, his injuries wouldn't allow it, but he looked into her eyes with an intensity that made the cameras disappear. I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But when you know, you know. Finley Jenkins, will you give me the honor of being by my side? Not as my nurse, but as my wife. Finley stared at him. The drama, the fear, the running, it all faded. She looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible. You're an idiot, she laughed, tears streaming down her face. You're supposed to be resting. Is that a yes? Jack grinned. Yes, Finley whispered. That's a yes. 6 months had passed since the gavel fell in that DC hearing room. But for Finley O'Connell, the silence was the biggest change. It wasn't the terrifying, lonely silence of her apartment when she was hiding from the world. It was a warm, productive silence, the kind that exists between 2 people who know each other's souls so well that words become secondary. The autumn wind whipped off Lake Michigan, rattling the oversized pane glass windows of the renovated brick building in Chicago's West Loop. The frosted lettering on the glass door was still fresh, catching the afternoon light. O'Connell and Jenkins, Veteran Advocacy and Trauma Center. Finley stood in the lobby, adjusting the cuff of her white coat. It fit perfectly. Gone were the oversized, shapeless scrubs that she used to wear like a shield at St. Jude's. Underneath the coat, she wore a tailored navy blouse and slacks projecting an air of authority she had once suppressed. The embroidery on her chest pocket was simple, yet every time she looked at it, a flush of pride warmed her skin. Finley O'Connell, RNM-SN, Director of Care. The clinic didn't smell like a hospital. There was no stinging scent of antiseptic or the metallic tang of fear. It smelled of brewing coffee, old leather armchairs, and cedarwood. It was designed to be a sanctuary, a place where the men and women who had seen the worst of humanity could come to find the best of it. Finley walked through the waiting area. It was full but calm. In the corner, an older Marine with a prosthetic leg was playing chess with a young woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. They both looked up and nodded respectfully as Finlay passed. She knew their stories. She knew their medications, their triggers, and the names of the ghosts that haunted them at night. She wasn't just checking vitals anymore. She was rebuilding lives. She pushed open the heavy oak door to the main office. Jack was there, sitting behind a desk that was cluttered with case files and legal briefs. He looked different than he had in the hospital bed, and certainly different than the bloodied warrior on the gurney. He was wearing a soft flannel shirt and jeans. His posture relaxed. The cane he still needed for his hip injury was leaning against the desk, a permanent reminder of the day they met. But he no longer looked at it with resentment. He looked up as she entered, his piercing blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're late, Mrs. O'Connell." He teased his voice, a low rumble that still gave her butterflies. "I got held up with the new intake," Finlay said, closing the door and walking over to him. She sat on the edge of his desk, picking up a file. "Corporal Miller, 101st Airborne." He couldn't stop shaking. He reminded me of, well, me. 3 years ago. Jack's expression softened. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band on her finger. And I told him to breathe," Finlay said softly. "I told him that the war is over, and he doesn't have to fight it alone anymore. I think he actually believed me." "He should," Jack said. "You have a way of making people believe in the impossible. Look at me." Finlay smiled, leaning down to kiss him. It was a lingering kiss, full of the shared history that only they understood. They had bypassed the normal stages of dating and gone straight from strangers to co-conspirators, to life partners in the span of a single explosive month. "Speaking of impossible," Jack said, pulling a crumpled newspaper clipping from under a stack of files. "Look what the cat dragged in." Finlay took the paper. It was a small column from a local New Jersey gazette. The headline read, "Local Urgent Care Site for Long Wait Times. Staff Complaints Rise." Halfway down the article there was a familiar name. Dr. Lucas Sterling, head physician at the Strip Mall Clinic, declined to comment on the allegations of mismanagement. Finlay let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Urgent care in a strip mall," she mused, checking sore throats and giving flu shots. "It's almost poetic," Jack smirked. "The man who thought he was God is now handing out lollipops to toddlers. The medical board made it clear he'll never step foot in a level 1 trauma center again. He lost his prestige, his high-rise condo, and his reputation." "I almost feel sorry for him," Finlay lied, tossing the clipping into the recycling bin. "No, you don't." Jack laughed. "No, I don't," she admitted. "He hurt people, Jack. He made me feel small. He made me feel like my service was a stain on my record. He deserves every minute of mediocrity he gets." Jack squeezed her hand. "He's the past, Finlay. This," he gestured around the room, "this is the future." The phone on Finlay's desk began to ring. It wasn't the jarring, heart-stopping alarm of the ER bat phone. It was a standard rhythmic ringtone, but the significance wasn't lost on her. 6 months ago, a ringing phone meant a crisis she wasn't allowed to handle. It meant hiding her skills. It meant fear. Now it meant opportunity. Finlay stood up and walked to her desk. She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, the city that had once felt like a prison, now looking like a kingdom she helped protect. She caught her reflection in the glass, shoulders back, chin up, eyes clear and bright. The rookie was dead and buried. The medic had returned. She picked up the receiver, her voice steady, commanding, and full of warmth. O'Connell and Jenkins Advocacy. This is Finlay. How can I help you? As she listened to the voice on the other end, Jack watched her from across the room, a look of pure adoration on his face. They had survived the war, survived the conspiracy, and survived the trial. Now they had the rest of their lives to save everyone else. And that is the story of how a rookie nurse took down an arrogant doctor, exposed a military conspiracy, and found love in the middle of a war zone. Finlay Jenkins reminds us that true strength isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about knowing what to do when the silence falls. Dr. Sterling learned the hard way. Never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate a combat medic. If you loved this story of justice, romance, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this with a friend who needs to see a bully. Get what they deserve, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.